Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. I'm on TikTok and I should be live on YouTube as well. I've had so many questions and comments about the Renters Reform Bill. I thought the best way to address this was to actually go live so that I could firstly express my thoughts on the matter, which I have done a little more comprehensively in a video which I posted earlier today, but also to answer the many questions that I have had from you. As I have already said, the Renters Reform Bill, I believe, is not going to do anything to help the housing crisis whatsoever. In fact, it is going to make things much, much worse. In fact, it already has done, because it has been a reason for thousands and thousands of landlords to exit the market. Of course, there have been many landlords who have already exited the market in anticipation of what was expected to be legislation to be brought in 2025, forcing them to upgrade their properties to an EPC level of a C as a minimum. And in the last 2-3 weeks, Michael Gove has shelved that indefinitely, so I'm not sure what will happen there. But with regards to the Renters Reform Bill, I really don't think it addresses any of the problems that should have been addressed incrementally over the last few years. The assured short hold tenancy has actually been around for 35 years now. It was introduced in 1988 by Margaret Thatcher, and the reason for its introduction was to create a mobile British workforce so people could move around quite easily with their job. And we've now come full circle where people need to move with their job, and they can't because they can find a job, but they can't find accommodation, certainly not accommodation where they can move with their families. So in that respect, we have actually regressed, but there are other issues that are not addressed by the Renters Reform Bill. For example, a minimum standards for properties is to be announced in the future. That's something that should have been addressed a long time ago. The problem with anything like this is that, as we know from motorists and many other aspects in life, that they quickly become a cash cow for local authorities, and I'm not in any way supporting that. And in fact, I believe that measures should be taken to ensure that that does not happen. But regardless of the questions that I've had from landlords about what can they do and should they get together to lobby the government, that has already been done. The only way that there will be tangible progress in this matter that will benefit all is if it is lobbied by all sides together. When people begin to stop viewing landlords and tenants as opposing adversaries, but rather as partners, then that would be a good starting point, because, as I've said previously, landlords need tenants and tenants need properties to rent. Eliminate the landlords, and as we have seen, the number of available properties dwindles and everybody suffers. More than anyone, it is those in most need who suffer the most. And there are things, I made a few notes of a few things that I would have addressed. I do believe that, for example, that as well as working together and as well as an introduction of some sort of minimum standards, and once again, that's not something that the local authorities should be involved in. It should be something that could be conducted by people who are already quite familiar with entering and assessing properties, be they surveyors, be they estate agents, be they energy performance assessors, someone who is able to non-invasively take a look around a property and make notes and pass the property as suitable for purpose. And that would address a lot of issues, and I have no doubt that the vast majority of landlords would have absolutely no problem with that, because the vast majority of landlords are professional. We are only talking about a minority, and as I've previously said, there are more offences and acts of gross negligence from landlords who are institutional landlords and housing associations than by private individuals. I do also believe that there should be the introduction of a level 3 qualification for landlords. This is not to make them jump through hoops or make life difficult for them. In fact, it is to protect them, because so much legislation has been brought in that landlords are so easily able to fall foul of the law, and some of the fines can be horrendous. So there are many level 3 qualifications courses available online for less than £50, and this would be a great starting point for many landlords so that they are familiar with the law. This also benefits tenants because they would have a more professional landlord, but more than anything, as you've seen with the fines that have gone through the roof for renting a property to somebody who is not legally allowed to be here, they are horrendous. And quickly on that note, I've contacted several companies who conduct right to rent checks, and I asked them, if a landlord asks you to conduct a right to rent check, can you confirm that this will cover them completely with regards to the law that they regarding immigration? The answer I got from all of them was, I don't know, I need to look into it. They should know, this is their business. And if somebody gives you the incorrect information, then you could be fined £15,000-20,000, whatever it is now, I've forgotten, for each one, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they're taking their problem and making it the landlord's problem. I've yet to find one who can say to me, yes, it will cost X amount per application, and we will then verify that your tenant is completely compliant, the same as you would do for an anti-money laundering check. I believe that there should be incentives, tax incentives made available for landlords who wish to offer longer leases. But keep in mind that this is not just the decision of the landlords. Most lenders stipulate that you are not to rent a property for more than 12 months. And it is the lenders who make it so difficult to sell a property with a tenant in situ. So that should have been addressed by the government, and it is not, because they clearly do not want to upset the banks. 600,000 vacant properties, derelict, unfit for purpose throughout the country. Properties that it is individual developers, part-time developers who would buy and lovingly renovate. And what's been done to encourage that? George Osborne added a 3% stamp duty surcharge, which, fair enough, may not apply to some of them, provided that the buyer knows how to go about it, because HMRC certainly won't tell you. And this year, the current Chancellor has basically announced that the capital gains tax allowance is all but being abolished. I believe that there should be incentives to encourage individual investors to bring these properties back into use. Whether they rent them on or sell them on, those properties will then be made available to individuals or families to use. There should be provision for people who are renting out their own home for a fixed period. It could be conditional. For example, they lived in the property for 6 months or 12 months immediately prior to renting the property out. And when they are returning to the property, they will then live in the property for 6 or 12 months after the event. Now, there's been a lot of people who are thinking that the Renters Reform Act will somehow void their Section 21 and suddenly it won't be possible to evict them. That may be true in certain cases, but not in all cases. Currently, if a Section 21 doesn't apply, and I assure you there are thousands of landlords who have issued Section 21s, when these eventually get to court, because the courts are backlogged by so many months, they will be thrown out because there are many landlords who inadvertently, they or their agent, have fallen foul of the new rules after the Deregulation Act in 2015. So if you can't use the Section 21 under the current system, you have to go for Section 8. Now in Section 8, there are what's called mandatory and discretionary grounds to apply for possession of the property. Now, under the mandatory terms, you can apply for possession of the property if you intend to move back into that property. But once again, judges won't allow you to say you're moving into a house that is a buy-to-let, you never lived in it, and you have another home. They will turn down your application. But the crucial one that many landlords are struggling with now is, how do you take possession of a property in order to sell it? And I think there's a misconception out there, especially by tenants, that if the Renters Reform Bill were to be introduced, that things will change for the better. But in that regards, actually landlords will have more rights, because one of the grounds proposed for the Renters Reform Bill is mandatory possession if you want to use the property for your own home or if you want to sell it. And there is no provision for possessing a home to sell it under the current Section 8 rules, unless of course you're a bank and you're repossessing, because as we know, banks are always covered, aren't they? Let me just have a quick look here if there's any questions here. Where are we now? Okay, let's go. It's being able to take over. Join. It's all about the banks. Yes, it is. No, I'm not a mortgage broker. I'm an estate agent. I do have a mortgage broker on my team. Goes by the name of James. He's a wonderful guy. If you ever need any advice, he's always happy to spare a few minutes to help anyone. Since they're able to take over and rent properties, they are destroying the little landlord. Yes, absolutely. This is my argument, or has been all along. They have set tenant against landlord, landlord against tenant, and in the meantime, everybody is being pushed out and everybody is basically being trodden on by the corporations and the banks. Now, Lloyd's Bank, as you know, has declared that by 2025 they intend to be the country's largest landlord. But this is not filling in the void that has been left by landlords, private landlords, who have been pushed out of the market. Is it worth becoming a landlord at the moment? Yes, it is, because there are no rules out there that people can stay in your property and not pay you. There are, the law is fair. However, the law has clamped down on basically using properties with people in place for a fast buck. If you intend to buy property and present it professionally and rent it long term, and you ensure that your tax position is correct, then yes, absolutely, people will always be looking for somewhere to rent, to live, and the vast majority of people pay their rent promptly every month. However, the terms of being a landlord have changed. We don't know where interest rates will go. We don't know when they do begin to come down, where they will settle. Somehow I don't expect sub 2% mortgages in the foreseeable future. And that means that combined with the changes in the tax rules, properties, buy-to-let properties on a loan to value of 75% are not really viable in most of the southeast, especially. They are up north. There are some very, very good yields to be made up north, and there are some great opportunities to buy properties in need of renovation and then rent those properties out and get a great return on them. But further south, your maximum loan to value needs to be 60%, if not less, for it to be viable and for you to be safe. How many months notice you need to give for sale of the property? Okay. Under the current rules, basically, even if you give somebody 2 months notice, under Section 8, you have to go to the court. There's no fast track like there is with Section 21. And in most cases, even with the Section 21, you can't use the fast track because there are always extenuating circumstances. And if you are at the mercy of a Section 8 ruling, the courts currently are backed up for between 9 months to a year. So that is the very difficult one at the moment. And I know for a fact there are landlords out there who have had their income drop because of the changes to the tax rules, and then interest rates rose, and they are actually paying out more than they are collecting each month, and they are unable to get out of that trap, and they are slowly going bankrupt, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Under the Renters Reform Act, though, you would have grounds, but it all hinges on their new so-called ombudsman. How efficient will that be? And how long will that take to process? Who knows? You can pin a comment to the top. Okay, right. Okay, right. One further thing. Going back to the Renters Reform Act. As I said, where accidental landlords are concerned, I do think that they should be specifically covered. One other thing that is often a problem with tenancies, or when they end, is deposits. Again, I believe that subject to professional inventory when the lease commences, the very people that could conduct annual checks, who are qualified and experienced in being able to quickly assess a property, could be called upon where there is a dispute about damages to actually verify the condition of the property as compared to the inventory when the property was rented out. And I believe that their report should be able to be forwarded to the deposit protection scheme, and it should be final. And if it is deemed that a figure of X amount should be deducted for damages, then the property redress scheme, tenancy deposit scheme, should refund that amount or forward that amount to the landlord to avoid disputes. Simple things, but these can only happen if landlords and tenants work together. They're not going to happen with a tenants association. They're not going to happen with a landlords association, because these different associations play right into the hands of the politicians, because they have an agenda to turn one against the other. So while everybody is so busy being focused on each other as adversaries, they're missing out what the government is doing behind their back. And what is happening with housing in particular is sinister. And at a time when there's a housing crisis, at a time where there are more vacant and derelict properties throughout the country than there are people in need of homes, for the Chancellor to eliminate capital gains tax allowance is ridiculous. It could have been an incentive. It could have been conditional to renovating a property of up to a maximum of 100 square meters, plus improving the energy performance certificate. At the end of the day, our housing stock is a national asset. It's not an individual asset. We're just passing through. So having an ongoing policy to encourage owners, landlords to continually improve properties cannot be a bad thing, because it means that generation after generation are being handed properties in better condition. Where do you think is the best place to purchase at the moment for landlords? I think it's worth looking further north. I don't think that the southeast has a good yield whatsoever. It's far too low and far too volatile. There are obviously pockets up north where entire areas are run down, and that needs to be approached with care, of course. But there are many properties, literally, once you say, I'm in Northampton, which is the next junction up from Milton Keynes. Once you go beyond Northampton, Coventry, Leicester and beyond, you can begin to see properties that are great opportunities with a much, much better yield. For example, I was speaking to a friend the other day. He lives up in Chesterfield, struggling to find somewhere to live. I'd asked him what the average rent is on a 2 up, 2 down, and you're looking up there at around 700, possibly even 800 pounds. And I had a quick look to see what's available, and you can find something for less than £100,000. That's a yield that's more than double, if not more, what you would get in the southeast. Do you think they want only the banks to be landlords? I think they, as you refer it, are the banks and their friends. Obviously, you are aware of the changes from the 11th of September. Why is it always 11th of September? That NatWest will clamp down on cash deposits and withdrawals. They've not named a figure, but it's expected to be a maximum of £500, and it could be less. I'll go into that in the future. So the banks are behind a lot of the ills that are happening in this country, and a lot of it is also because MPs have demonstrated in their arrogance that they are unaccountable, and because they are unaccountable, they can do whatever they want. They removed a leader for whatever reason and placed someone else in power for whatever reason. She was elected and she did what she promised to do, and they got her out and they put Fishy Rishi in place, and we all know who his friends are. He is not the friend of the average person. He can't empathise with the average person, and to be honest, him or his predecessor had no right to be prime ministers without the mandate of the people. So ultimately, they have become so complacent that and cynical that they don't even consider the public anymore. Can I sell my property with tenants in place? My property is free from mortgage. You can do, but it's very difficult, once again, because of the banks. If you have a tenant in place, most of your buyers, unless they happen to be cash buyers, will have to jump through so many hoops to satisfy the lender that they'll probably give up, or the sale will just fall through. So yes, of course, by all means, try to sell with a tenant in place, because it's quite unfair that tenants need to be evicted so the property can be sold. Throughout Europe, properties are bought and sold with tenants in place who have been there for 10, 20, 30 years or generations even. Why is it in this country that you can't technically, most of the time, give somebody a lease for more than 12 months and you can't sell a property with a tenant in place? Isn't Rishi Sunak feel the biggest digital agency? Yes, they're definitely pushing digital currency. The race for a cashless society has accelerated dramatically since the lockdown. We won't go into discussion about the lockdown, but the world has changed dramatically since then, and all of this has changed dramatically. And this change to a cashless society, this change to a digital currency is probably one of the most sinister changes culturally, economically, socially in history. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. I'm inclined to agree. I'm afraid I'm inclined to agree. Sadly, we have had that in this day and age, for people to be either homeless or hungry, whoever they are, is an absolute disgrace. More and more and more people are sleeping rough on the streets every day. There was a video I made, I think 3-4 years ago. I'll post it when I remember. In front of an industrial unit here in Northampton that I knew at the time had been empty for 10 years. That's just one example. There are thousands like it, whether it's industrial, whether it's office space, throughout the country. And there are people sleeping on the streets. Are you telling me that it's not possible to make one of these units at least an emergency shelter for people to sleep overnight rather than endure the humiliation and suffering of sleeping on the streets? Because if there were a place that was an emergency shelter, we know how people in this country are. We know there would be donations of clothes. We know there would be donations of food. We know that there would be people who would go in to help, to counsel, etc. But nothing at all. Still empty now. There are around the country millions and millions of square feet of empty premises, industrial, residential, office space. Any of it could be used as emergency shelters. Anything is better than sleeping on the streets. And yet, the pride of our shopping streets, Oxford Street, is turning into an open air hotel. It's an absolute disgrace. I thought Rishi Sunak's father-in-law runs the biggest digital agency. I'm not 100% certain about that, to be honest. But no matter what the case is, there is definitely a sinister element to Rishi Sunak, the manner in which he came to power, and more importantly, agree or disagree. That's irrelevant. Everybody should have that right. But it is a fact that the Bank of England unsettled the markets the night before Kwasi Kwarteng was going to deliver his speech. No matter what he did, the markets were going to go into frenzy following that budget, and that was started by the Bank of England. They wanted him out, and they wanted to put their favourite Rishi Sunak in. And because the party members did not vote for Sunak, the second time round, they left the party members out because they could, because we allow them to get away with it, because we allow them to treat us in this manner. And they have put so many people in the position of being homeless, technically homeless, the invisible homeless who are couch surfing, friends, family, etc. And we continually allow them to get away with it. So these are things I will cover in a separate thing, because then we'd be going off on a political tangent, and I won't be boring you with that here, because that's not what you signed up for. Anyway, with regards to the Renters Reform Act, I believe time is of the essence. It has been put back towards the end of the year, but we're in August already, so it's only a few months away before it goes back to before Parliament. I believe that it is up to all people involved in the private rental sector, landlords and tenants alike, to come to some agreements, to have propositions that are mutually acceptable and beneficial for all, to encourage landlords into the market and not clobber them, to be merciless with landlords who are abusive, landlords who expect tenants to live in squalor. But again, that is a small minority. It doesn't even come into that. And a simple annual check could eliminate that. So let's not bash the majority of decent landlords because of a small minority, just as we've done with a small minority of tenants. The vast majority of landlords simply want to offer their property for rent and get an income. The vast majority of tenants want to be able to rent a property and pay their rent and live their lives. And increasingly so, as as we go through economic turmoil, people need to be able to move around the country with their jobs, and that needs to be addressed again, because the last 6 or 7 years have caused irreparable damage to something that took years to put into place. Thank you for information. Thank you very much for watching. I'll probably end it here so that I don't repeat myself, unless there's any more questions. I'm supposed to be live on YouTube, but unless I've gone live on the wrong channel, I haven't got a clue, so I can't see any questions on there. But anyway, I will in future, with issues that have a lot of questions, I will go live, because that gives you the opportunity to ask me directly. I'm always happy to answer questions on the fly, and I don't know everything. And if I am stuck, I won't lie or make it up. I will say I'll need to check up on that. But rest assured that I will move high heaven to get answers. But sometimes even I can't get answers. Just as I've not been able to establish who I can give a name to, and they can come back and just say, if you rent your property to this person, you will not have any problem with the Home Office. None of them. And it's their job. One further thing, while we're on the note of illegal tenants, the way that it is worded about tenants or lodgers, as far as as I understand, I am unable to clearly and definitively distinguish between a lodger and somebody who rents a room in your house, say with Airbnb. There are people who rent out rooms on Airbnb, not just whole apartments or properties. And again, I have been trying to get answers. What happens if an illegal immigrant rents a room, in one of your properties via Airbnb? Who is liable? Are you still liable as the landlord? Because as we know from case law, just recently, an agent made an error, but it was the landlord who was liable. This I still have not been able to get definitive yes or no answers to. That's all for now. I hope that this has helped. As always, if you have any questions, message, email, call, whatever works for you. And if I'm free, I'll answer. If not, I'll respond as soon as I have time. Thank you very, very much. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye for now. Bye. There we go. And how do I end? I don't even know how to end here. All right, here we go.